Podcast, a Dallas Cowboys fan-made podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Joe and Shane.
Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, thank you for listening to Dem Boys Podcast, episode 11. My name is Joe Vaya, that's at Unmore Cup of Joe, and joining me today, as always, one of the hardest working guys on NFL Twitter, Shane Carter, that's at Shane Carter TX. What's up, Shane, and how you doing this dramatic Wednesday?
Yeah, they call it dramatic. I mean, you knew I was going to be bummed out about this. I mean, everyone who listens to the show, and, you know, we've been friends for a decade, you know how much I love Dak Prescott and how much I've been pulling for him to get this extension done and how much I thought it was going to get done. And I can't believe it didn't get done. So, I don't know, miffed. I guess that's the word, miffed. We'll go with that.
Miffed. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed. I know last week we were talking, you know, we were in high hopes that this week was going to come with good news, and we weren't hoping for this scenario, this possible doomsday scenario. We don't want a Kirk Cousins situation to end up unfolding, but so far we're halfway there, and I fear for the future. But if you don't already know, the franchise tag extension deadline has come and gone, and a long-term contract between Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys did not happen. Prescott will play out his $31.4 million franchise tag for the 2020 season, and we'll go through all this all over again next off season. So Shane, what happened? Do you really think, I saw some reports that there was some last minute talks, but I also saw other reports that there haven't been any talks since March. So what do you think? Do you think the Cowboys and Dak Prescott just fell out a long time ago? Do you think this really was down to the wire and then it just didn't work out? I know there was a recent rumor of an offer just yesterday that was up to $100 million guaranteed, but the actual specifics such as the per year and how many years was left out. All that was really mentioned was the $100 million guaranteed. So in my opinion, you know, before you go do your thing, because I know you probably have a lot to say. I think the Cowboys were really, really stuck on the years. You know, Dak wanted the short term, 4 years, so he can, you know, prove again. I guess he didn't prove it obviously this time, right? He didn't prove enough to the Cowboys that he's worth the money, he's worth the franchise, or worth to be the face of the franchise, and then get paid again in 4 years. And the Cowboys were stuck on the 5-year term. I think that's really what it was. It could have been the Mahomes deal threw all this in a loop. Maybe they had something, you know, they were going to agree to, and then the Mahomes deal jumped Dak Prescott, because, you know, Prescott was next in line, and then, you know, we would think it'd be Mahomes, Watson, so on, but Mahomes kind of jumped the gun there, which, you know, good for him, good for the Chiefs. It worked out for both parties. But for the Cowboys, you know, we're kind of in limbo. Sure, we have Dak for this year, but, you know, going forward with the new coaching staff, we have a team that you and I and plenty of others believe is competitive, as a contender, especially with the offense that we've built. But the leader of the team and the quarterback, you know, is only guaranteed to be with us for 1 year. I mean, I guess you could just give me your thoughts, but I mean, I'm concerned about the future, and I'm not sure that the Cowboys are 100% sold on him. It's not so much of a money issue. It's more of a relationship now, and if that they're not sure if Dak's their guy.
You know, I agree that years were part of it. If I'm basing it just on reports, they were at an odds for not only the number of years, the guaranteed money, and how much money per year. Now, we talked about it last week. Dak wasn't going to get anywhere near the Mahomes deal. He wasn't going to get $45 million a year. We all knew that. But if you remember, I also said that this propelled his asking price not only to what the new top would have been, but what the minimum would have been. And now his new minimum asking price was probably Russell Wilson, or at the very least a little bit above that. You know, they knew he wasn't going to be the highest paid quarterback, but being the second highest paid quarterback still keeps the market going, because everyone knows, it's pretty much common knowledge that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the game, right? And there's no shame in being second or third best, because you can still win in the NFL being the second or third best quarterback. Drew Brees and Brandon Roethlisberger all did it during Peyton and Tom Brady's reign, and so it's still possible. So I think his asking price probably jumped from around Russell Wilson years, 4 years, 35, probably more along the lines like 4 years, 36, 37. And the Cowboys offer was 5 years, 33 to 35 mil a year, and like you said, about 100 mil guaranteed. The issue with that is that it's kind of a slap in the face if you consider who we're comparing these contracts to. Because, I bring up Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz all the time because those are quarterbacks that he's faced off against many times. He's beaten them each many times. He's lost a couple times. He does. No quarterback's ever been undefeated, throughout their career. But he's matched up with them well. And those guys are getting $32 or $33, $33.5 million a year. And that's just the baseline. So the per year average, you're saying that you're just as good as them, but you're not better. And then the guaranteed money is actually below what they got guaranteed. So what you're saying is that each year, not only you ain't as good as them, but overall, you're not there just yet. Even though I've made the case, you've made the case, everybody who, has eyes, ears, mouth, and nose knows that he's outplayed them. You can say that Goff has a better deep ball. Wentz is a better, a better prospect in terms of height, weight. He's the model quarterback, and Kirk Cousins is I don't know why people love Kirk Cousins more than Dak, but some people do. But Dak's outplayed him, and they offered him a low ball offer, and so I think part of it was not only do I think they might question Dak deserves his money, but part of it might have been a little bit of the Jerry Jones arrogance that, I can get these guys to sign how much I want to because this is the Cowboys. I could talk them into hey, we just drafted CeeDee Lamb. We signed Amari Cooper. We got Ezekiel Elliott. You got the best line in football, or at least one of. You got a new head coach who loves the West Coast offense, along with your friend and favorable OC Kellen Moore. You're going to put up huge numbers. Take this offer and we'll renegotiate in a couple of years. But Dak was like, no. He wanted his money and he wanted it now, like J.G. Wentworth. And the fact that they didn't do it means that now the cap is going to suffer. And I've said for a while that the cap is essentially just bookkeeping, right? I've said that before, right? It's on record. We said it on a couple podcasts,
right?
Haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that now that he's on the tag, that the bookkeeping is going to be a little bit steeper. The tag is only beneficial if it means that they're going to keep the player from going into free agency and the team owns his rights. So he can't be a free agent. But the problem is that if there's no extension on that, none of Dak's money is guaranteed. And also that it's a bigger strain on the cap for this year. So both sides lose. People will keep saying, "Oh, Dak's going to get this much money this year." Well, I mean, I hope to God he doesn't get hurt. He's done a good job of staying healthy, but none of that money is guaranteed, and that's the issue. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again: if they had given Dak what he asked for, March of 2019, hey, we'll give you 4 years, $29 million a year. Maybe even 30. Maybe they could have wiggled it there, more along the lines of the Matt Ryan money, but giving him the 4 years before Goff and Kirk Cousins got his extension, and Carson Wentz and Mahomes and all these guys, and eventually Watson and maybe Baker Mayfield and all these other guys getting these contracts. His prices keep going up, and they keep dragging their feet. So I don't know if it's ownership arrogance or a lack of belief in what you've been seeing right before your very eyes, or not realizing that the quarterback market is dependent on who's paid next. And I don't know. I don't have a straight answer as to why this happened. I'm disappointed it didn't. Disappointed is probably a light way of saying it. I'm irritated it didn't, but here we are. Right.
Irritated is a good word for it. Someone else who was irritated on Twitter, I'm not sure if you saw, but the brother of Dak Prescott, Tad Prescott, tweeted out, quote, "There's a reason that I was never a Dallas Cowboy fan growing up or before they drafted Dak. After today, who knows how much longer I'll be cheering for them." and it's got a lot of retweets and a lot of likes. So some strong words from his family, possibly mirroring how Dak is feeling. I know, he's not going to come out and say it himself, but his brother has some pretty strong words for the organization. Also, going forward, I think for Dak, with his future with the team, it's just baffling to me that the Cowboys don't see that he's a franchise quarterback, that he's capable of leading the team. He has all the intangibles, everything you want in a leader. There's teams out there who are begging to draft a quarterback that will be decent. There's teams that draft and sign quarterbacks every year and they swing and miss like the Jaguars every single time. So what I can see happening in the future, and I hope that this doesn't happen, is there's teams like the Steelers, the Colts, the Bears that could all benefit from signing a Dak Prescott next year, and they're instantly in the conversation for a Super Bowl. Can you imagine Dak Prescott and the Steelers defense in the AFC? I think that they'd probably be more favored than, maybe not the Chiefs, but they would give them a run for their money, even more than the Ravens could, with that defense and even the weapons that they have on offense as well. The Bears also, I'm not sure how much longer the Trubisky experiment's going to go on, but I'm sure that they would love a quarterback like Dak Prescott and they would not hesitate to sign him. So I just think the Cowboys are not appreciating, the luck that they had. One, they just had this previously with Tony Romo, right? They were super lucky that they ended up with a Pro Bowl quarterback for free.
Yep. 4th
round pick, Dak Prescott, he's basically free, right? They didn't even want him. He just was like one of the only quarterbacks left, so they just took him. And maybe because he was a 4th round that they're not appreciating him. But at the same time, Romo was undrafted. So you can't really make that argument, because Dak's a 4th round pick, he doesn't command the amount of respect that a 1st round would. Or maybe it's just a relationship, right? Tony was like a son to Jerry, and Dak obviously doesn't have that relationship with Jerry. So I don't know, it's just frustrating. I'm kind of rambling, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully this year, we know Dak's going to ball out. Hopefully the offense is just as good as last year, because offensively they were pretty good. They just couldn't really score. If they can end drives by scoring touchdowns, I think they're gonna be great. With the new coaching staff, but keeping it familiar with Kellen Moore and adding CeeDee Lamb, letting Jarwin run loose, letting Zeke run loose, and Dak Prescott at the helm, I think we're gonna have a great year, and he's gonna have to prove it again that he is the face of the franchise. And we'll see what happens. Maybe he goes to the Pro Bowl. What do you think it's going to take? Do you think it's going to be a Pro Bowl year? Does he have to be MVP? Does it have to be a Super Bowl? Does he have to make the Super Bowl? Like, what do you think it's going to take?
Well, I would hope it wouldn't have to take a Super Bowl for him to get paid, because how many quarterbacks in the league got paid but didn't make the Super Bowl? I can list them off. Matt Stafford didn't. Carson Wentz got into the playoffs, but we can't pretend that Nick Foles didn't actually get him to the Super Bowl. Derek Carr got paid. Kirk Cousins got paid. Jimmy Garoppolo got paid. The list goes on and on. So I hope that Jerry isn't holding this whole win it all or bust in order to keep you thing over Dak Prescott's head. That reminds me of Coach Boone from Remember the Titans. If you remember, if at the beginning of the movie they said that if he lost one game, he'd be fired. So I would hope that they wouldn't put Dak in a situation where, hey, you got to win MVP, you got to make it to the Super Bowl or whatever, just to get the money you've already earned. You're right. Dak is going to put up good numbers again this year. He's probably going to put 4,000 yards again. He's probably going to put up about 30 touchdowns again. I think what ownership is they're just impatient. And also they're running out of time. It's been since 1996 since they held a trophy. It's been a long time since the Cowboys have held the trophy, and part of them believes that Dak can do it, especially with this squad, and they can, and this coach, and they can. But I think if they put all this pressure on him, then they set themselves up for failure. Now, Dak has been one of the best quarterbacks when it comes to, avoiding pressure and overcoming adversity. Some quarterbacks buckle under pressure. Dak seems to thrive under it. If you look at his entire career, right? I think what it's going to take for a contract is, I think really, if at the very least the Cowboys offered a contract, right? So it wasn't like they'd let him walk like they'd done in the past. So obviously they have interest in keeping him, but they want to keep him at a certain number. I think if they don't win the Super Bowl, but Dak has another good year, another Pro Bowl year, another solid year, and maybe they make the playoffs, then they can renegotiate. The only way that Dak's going to get that, sign here, blank check is if he, wins MVP or at least makes the Super Bowl. I mean, that's what it's going to take. Going back to your earlier argument about how many teams could benefit from Dak, I keep making this argument all the time that Dak is put under a macroscope, not a microscope, a macroscope. He's looked at more than anybody else because he plays for the biggest sports brand in the world, not in America, in the world. Real Madrid is like probably the biggest one in terms of soccer fans, but in terms of like highest earning sports organization in the world, the Dallas Cowboys are the highest earning, right?
Exactly.
And he plays the most popular, most important position in football, the quarterback. He is the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. So when people put him on this pedestal with guys like Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach, they're saying, hey, you have to be as good as him. I've said this many times. If you put Dak Prescott and what he's done, postseason, regular season, all his numbers, everything he's done on Jacksonville or Detroit or Cincinnati or Cleveland or Arizona or, one of the lesser franchises. I'm sorry to insult anybody, the Dolphins. I'm sorry, but like one of those lesser franchises, at least as of late, you put him on one of them and he does what he does, he's an MVP candidate, a legitimate MVP candidate. And people forget that in 2 of his 4 seasons, he's been on the MVP ballot. He was there rookie year and last year. People don't remember that, but he was. And so I think that's another thing that frustrates me is that people just like put him up there with, the all-time greats when he's only in his mid-20s. He hadn't really I don't think he's been shown fully by ownership that he's the guy. I mean, they were fine letting him be the guy while he was being paid 4th rounder money, but now he's about to make quarterback money. Now he might not be the guy. He was saying, he needs another year to prove he's the guy. What has he not done in the last 4 years to prove he's the guy? There are players in the NFL that have done ridiculously outlandish things, or at least been accused of them, that are still on the team. Dak Prescott has been a model citizen on and off the field. He has. He does everything right on the field, does everything right off the field. He's the leader of the team. He wills his team to win. He puts up the numbers you want, especially last year. Last year he put up great numbers, and it still ain't enough. So I'm wondering, is it really a win it all or bust thing with Dak? If the Cowboys were serious that he is the guy of the future, they weren't just blowing smoke, they would have gotten this deal done. But I think you're right. I have to reevaluate my feelings about all this. And even though conventional wisdom says they have their quarterback sign him, the Cowboys might have reservations. They say, hey, we'll make you one of the best quarterbacks, one of the highest paid quarterbacks. But, we don't know about top 2, top 3 money. That's not getting crazy now. And I think it'd be irresponsible for him to take anything less because that's gonna have like a Tom Brady effect. Oh, hey, he took less money for his team. Why can't you do it? That's irresponsible. And so I think you're right. I think if that's what's going to take for him to get like that kind of extension, then that's unfair placement on their quarterback, because every team has the expectation of their quarterback to win the Super Bowl or at least compete for it every year. Every team does. But not every quarterback has to have the pressure of winning a Super Bowl just to get a bigger check.
Right. We can go on and on this, the different situations and rumors on why we think, this did not happen. We can save those for another time. We've kind of made our points here. So again, as you can tell, we're both pretty disappointed. We would like to hear what you guys think. I know on NFL Twitter and Cowboys Twitter, it's pretty much like split 50-50 on people wanted were wanting Dak to remain the Cowboys quarterback and wanting an extension, and the rest are saying that Dak is greedy. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think he's greedy. I just think that, he deserves what he's earned. And like you said, for him to take less money is sets a bad precedent for future quarterbacks in line that would end up being in the same situation, right? So, we know most likely Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson are probably going to get, superstar Mahomes type deals. And, I guess most people agree that, Dak Prescott is not in that stratosphere, at least not yet. But he is among, the best quarterbacks in the league. But for others that are at his caliber, he doesn't, and I'm sure the rest of the league doesn't want him to set that precedent in taking less money for the team, because that's just not fair for the individual, and especially what he's already done. He was Rookie of the Year. He's been to playoffs multiple times. His stats are great. Like, what more do you want, right? And like I said, we can go on and on, but anything that you want to throw in here, Shane, before we move on to the next topic?
I've said what I said, and I'm sticking to it. But I've said enough.
Okay, cool. So, because of, it's kind of a sad day, let's do a little celebration. So this year marks the 60th anniversary of the Dallas Cowboys as a franchise. As most people know, the Cowboys were established in 1960. So it's going to be a full 60 years of Dallas Cowboys football in the history of the Dallas Cowboys. And to start it off, we might end up doing this every couple episodes, just doing like a history, looking back at the team. So today, for today's episode, each of us picked a player, and we're going to pick our favorite players per decade through the Cowboys history. So the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And we'll just go back and forth and talk about our favorite players. And then if you guys have any comments on those players, whether you agree with us or whether you disagree with us, I think a couple of the ones that I picked, people are definitely going to disagree. But for some of the years, there's really like one or two that are like obvious. So I kind of went away from that and wanted to pick just some of my favorite players on who I really think were the best, even though they may not have gotten, the name recognition. So Shane, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So for the 1960s, thought about it, and I decided that the best way to really like just to pick someone for that, I had to think about, what all they did. They were founded in 1960. And they actually, their first season, they were 0-11-1. They were terrible.
Trash.
But yeah, I mean, they had guys like Don Meredith was their first quarterback, and eventually it led to them getting Roger Staubach. But it was a slow start for them. But I decided to go in a different way. I didn't pick a player. I picked the winningest head coach in Cowboys history. I went with the man Tom Landry.
That's a little cheating, but okay, I'll give it to you.
I don't think it's cheating. I understand that he won a lot of the Super Bowls that he went to and won were in the 70s, but his career really took off in the 60s because, like, not only people realize this, but for 20 seasons in a row, from 66 to 85, he actually had winning season, so that's plus 500. That's over 500 seasons, and he won their first Super Bowl in the 70s, obviously. But he got them to the playoffs in the Ice Bowl. I mean, I don't know who all listeners that was old enough to remember that, but he got them there. So I consider him the greatest Cowboys of the 60s because, one, there weren't a lot of great Cowboys in the 60s, and two, he was the jumping off point. He was the face of the franchise for so long that I felt it disrespectful not to put him there.
Okay, cool. I mean, he's definitely a legend. He's got that statue down there in Arlington. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but I've taken a picture with it. Everyone who visits the stadium, or everyone who visits the stadium or goes to a game, that's the number one of the top things that you want to do is see that Tom Landry statue. So that's awesome. Cool. My selection for the decade of the 60s was none other
I know who
than
you're going with.
Yeah, none other than Mr. Cowboy himself, Mr. Bob Lilly, partly because he is one of my favorite all-time players, but I do have an autographed jersey of Bob Lilly, so it's a little bit of my bias there. A couple of his accolades here. He is a Super Bowl champion, as you know. He went to the Pro Bowl 11 times. He was a 7-time first-team All-Pro and a 2-time second-team All-Pro. He was actually part of he was part of many NFL all-team teams, so like all-decade, all-time teams. He was part of the NFL 100th anniversary all-time team, the 1960s all-decade team, and 1970s all-decade team as well. And lastly, and probably most importantly, he is in the Dallas Cowboys Ring of Honor. Oh, and one cool stat here. I was going through his stats earlier when I was researching like all these players. He actually does have 1 interception in his career. I know you kind of played on the defensive line, but he did have 1 interception, so I'm sure he was very excited that day.
You know why they call him Mr. Cowboy, right?
I do, but you should enlighten our listeners.
Okay, so not only was he like born in Olney, which I mean, not a lot of people know that is. It's just north of the DFW, but he went to TCU, and he played his entire, I think it was like 14 seasons with the Cowboys. And so he was with them really from the start. He was their first great player. And the reality is, like, I mean, you and I both agree Bob Lilly probably is the greatest Cowboy this season. I put Tom Landry there out of respect. But, I mean, Bob Lilly to the start of the Cowboys was what Tom Brady was when he first took his first snap in New England. He was that important because he was on the team for, I think, like I said, 13, 14 seasons. And he was just their best player by far. But he was the man. He was that dude. Right.
Yeah, he's even if you watch some of his highlights, they're kind of grainy, but NFL Films does a pretty good job at restoring them. He is obviously the best player on the field every single down. It's kind of incredible. I'm sure his game would even reflect to today's game, and he would do great. You know, I know the game has changed a lot, but he wasn't even that much of a physical specimen. If you look at him, he's not like ripped or bulky or anything. He's just a big dude and a strong man. That's all he was. He was just old man strength. Yeah, that's true.
He had that long reach, and so that always helps to tackle that, especially if you have quick feet. You have quick feet and long arms, you can make a career.
Right. Cool. I'll go ahead and take the next one too, and then Shane, we'll go back to you. So for the 1970s, my selection was none other than Drew Pearson, the original 88 for life, who's, you know, CeeDee Lamb is now representing that historic number with the Cowboys. Some of his awards here, he's obviously, again, a Super Bowl champion. That's Super Bowl 12. 3-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro. He was also part of the 1970s All-Decade team, and he was an NFL receiving yards leader in 1977. And he is in the Cowboys Ring of Honor, but unfortunately, he is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is kind of a disgrace. It's kind of a disgrace.
Respectful.
But I'm sure he will be eventually. But we got to get him in there like ASAP.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, terrible. But
sorry, I've been very strong about him being in the Hall of Fame. He was my dad's. He was my dad's 88. So I mean, he's probably your dad's 88 too.
Right. And then he's a part of one of the greatest plays in NFL history, the Hail Mary. So just off of that, like, should automatically put you in the Hall of Fame. You know, not even considering all the accolades and all of the statistics that he achieved. You know, he was just part of one of the greatest plays ever, which ended up being adopted as a play now. You know, people do the Hail Mary all the time. So it's just disgraceful that he's not in the Hall of Fame. But
yeah, so you know, I mean, obviously I'm very strong about Drew Pearson and being in the Hall of Fame, but I can't believe you missed out on this guy. And this guy was my dad's, and probably still favorite Cowboy to this day, Roger Staubach. How did you forget about him?
I didn't forget about him. I didn't. I just wanted to go.
I think I throw it to him.
I know one of us has to pick Roger, so I was like, you know what, you can have him. I'll pick Drew Pearson. Like, of course.
But the correct answer is Roger Staubach.
Okay.
if we had no coaches and I said, okay, I can't pick Tom Landry for the 60s, Lilly would have been my 60s guy. And I would have said the greatest Cowboy of all time is Roger Staubach. He went to 5 Super Bowls, won 2 of them, and that was all in the 1970s. He was the quarterback of the 70s. I mean, I know Terry Bradshaw won 4, but we can't pretend that Staubach as a quarterback wasn't a better quarterback.
Now, on that though, real quick, I know it's your moment to shine right now, but I was comparing them, Terry Bradshaw and Staubach. Technically, the all-decade quarterback was Bradshaw.
But Staubach's on the 70s all-decade team though. He's on the team as well.
He is, but he wasn't number 1. So I'm not saying like anything against him. I'm just saying, like, you know, that's kind of why I picked Drew Pearson.
Terry Bradshaw of the 70s is essentially Eli Manning. You know, he had a couple good years where he made the Pro Bowl and whatnot, but he won the championships. And a lot of them, and let's face it, a lot of it was based on what still occurred. Not to say Bradshaw was a bad quarterback or Eli Manning is a bad quarterback, but we can't pretend like these guys are in the GOAT conversation among the quarterback positions. Staubach for a while was that guy. Because before Staubach, Unitas was the guy. And then after Unitas, people thought, okay, maybe this guy's the best quarterback of all time. And then Joe Montana took it, and then John Elway, and then so on and so forth, right? Staubach was not only the best Cowboy of the 70s, he might have been the best player in the NFL in the 70s. I mean, like you said, he's on the NFL 100 team, the 70s all-time team. He led the NFL in passing 4 times. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler. He won the Super Bowl twice. Won the Super Bowl MVP, one of them. And not people realize this. He's one of the best college/NFL players of all time in terms of guys who were great in college and the NFL. He won the Heisman in college, and he won the Super Bowl, and he won the Super Bowl in the NFL. So he might just be one of the greatest players of all time. So with all respect to Drew Pearson, who should have been in the Hall of Fame decades ago, the greatest Cowboy of the 70s is number 12. And here's further proof. No one has worn 12 on the Cowboys since him. They don't retire numbers. He's one of the few numbers that they hadn't officially retired, but that no one takes.
Yeah, it's just out of respect.
Well, I mean, think about it. There's like very few numbers the Cowboys have that they retire. I think like Aikman's one of them, Emmett's one of them, Staubach's one of them. I mean, 94 and 88 are some of those numbers that they don't retire, but they don't give out lightly.
Right, those are given instead of, asked for.
Yeah, like those are numbers like, hey, like we'll give you the number, but it means a lot to us. Like 21 means a lot to the Cowboys, 94, 88. No one's taking 12. 12 is one of those numbers you'll never see a Cowboy wear ever again. Maybe in the preseason, but it might just because of a jersey shortage or something like that. But that's about it.
Right. We got a couple, or at least I have at least one other number that I think will most likely join that class of numbers that are not given out lightly or is just maybe retired altogether. But that's a couple decades away. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the 80s. The 80s was kind of tough for me. The Cowboys weren't as, I don't want to say prevalent, but they weren't, the best team of the 80s. They definitely were not the team of the 80s. But They did have, some very good players. So the player that I ended up choosing was Randy White. Mm-hmm. He is also Super Bowl champion, was part of that Super Bowl 12 team. He was actually the Super Bowl MVP of that game, so that's pretty impressive there. He's a 9-time Pro Bowler, 9-time first team All-Pro. He was part of the NFL 100th anniversary all-time team, part of the 1980s all-decade team. He's in the Cowboys Ring of Honor, and he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He also has a bunch of college awards as well. He was a great college defensive end and linebacker. So he kind of did it all on the defense. Amazing player, amazing defensive player. He joined the Cowboys in 1975. He played all the way to 88, so he had a very long career. And he was actually the number 2 pick in the 1975 draft. So he was pretty high up there. Kind of hope that he had a little bit more winning success on the team later on in his career. But, early in his career, he had a hell of a time.
I actually agree with you. No, I 100% agree with you. I thought my mind immediately went to Randy White when I thought of the 80s of the Cowboys because he was their best player. I thought, okay, well, is there someone else who might take title from him? No, not Danny White. I thought the closest one that came to taking Randy White away from me was Tony Dorsett, because Tony Dorsett was one of the best running backs of the 80s. But, like, you know, he wasn't as good as Walter Payton. He wasn't as good as Eric Dickerson. Randy White might have been the best linebacker of the 80s. You know, if not the best, he was among the best. And like you said, for like 9 straight years, he was a first-team All-Pro. He was a Pro Bowl. He was on the all-time team, the all-decade team. Sorry, he was part of that Super Bowl team for Super Bowl 12. And him like Staubach had a great college career. He was a Lombardi winner, an Outland winner. He was a 2-time All-American. So he's another one of those great college players that was like all-time great in college, all-time great in the NFL. And so, like, I'm not going to argue with this one. Randy White was Bob Lilly for the Cowboys in the 1980s.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
His number 54, that's another one of those numbers the Cowboys, like, they don't just give out to no one. They give out to someone who they think will be special.
So, Jalen Smith?
Oh, you know, I love me some Jalen Smith. I think Jalen Smith's going to be a great Cowboy for years to come. I don't think he'll be in the same level of Randy White, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few more Pro Bowls out of him. But Randy White is in a class of his own in terms of like Cowboys defensive players. He might be the greatest Cowboys defensive player of all time. Might be.
Okay. Did you have somebody for the 80s?
Yeah, no, Randy White. I agree.
Oh, okay. Got it. Cool. Go ahead for the 90s now. This one should be interesting.
Okay, well, I mean, like a lot of people our age, I watched football from a young age, and so he was not only my first favorite Cowboy, he's my all-time favorite Cowboy. I started watching him when I was about 5 years old, and I almost got a chance to meet him. I was actually walking to the mall one day from an autograph signing. I couldn't get him to sign an autograph because I needed to buy like some memorabilia, but I couldn't afford it. So I was walking away, and I happened to be walking and I accidentally like get in the middle of his entourage, and I actually stood next to him by accident. You like to build up?
I do.
My pick is Emmitt Smith. He is my favorite Cowboy of all time to this day. Everyone in my family knows it. I mean, I think you know it. I used to have his jersey. I had his rookie card. Still, he was quintessential in those Cowboys teams of the early 90s. And even in those struggling Cowboys teams later on in the late 90s, early 2000s, who really had nothing else going for him, because he made Pro Bowls and all-pro teams like years after running backs supposed to be relevant. He was the driving force of that offense. And obviously that was back when the running game really meant something. And also, let's not forget the crowning achievement. He's the all-time leading rusher. All time. I remember watching that game against Seattle when he broke that record. I didn't care they lost that game. The team was terrible. The team was awful that year. I knew they weren't going to win that game.
They just wanted to get the record.
Yeah, exactly. Because like it sucks when you're an 11, 12-year-old kid and you see your team sucks, but you have a chance to see your favorite player do the impossible. Because you remember you and I, like, for a long time when we were kids, Peyton's record was like the thing Emmitt was trying to get to. He was really close. And on that final, I think it was 13-yard run against Seattle, the game stops for, I think it was like half an hour or something like that, whatever it was. And then Moose is there, and Irvin's there, and Troy is there. And it meant so much, not only to him, but to me, because, he is really one of my heroes. And so I could point out numbers all day, but I'm just going to state the obvious, Emmitt Smith.
It's hard to argue there, man. Emmitt Smith is the GOAT in my opinion. I mean, I gotta have to though. I gotta throw in my own guy.
I know who you're gonna say. Yeah. You love receivers. I know who you're gonna say. You love receivers.
That's right. So the receiver of the 90s, possibly the greatest receiver the Cowboys have ever had. Mm-hmm. Hopefully CeeDee Lamb will be the greatest receiver, but the playmaker himself, Michael Jerome Irving, you can catch him on NFL Network. I think he's still on there. Hyping up the Cowboys pretty much every single day. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion, was part of the triplets with Troy Aikman and your Emmitt Smith, possibly the greatest triplets in NFL history. 5-time Pro Bowler, Pro Bowl MVP. That's hard to get. He was first team All-Pro in 1991, 2-time second team All-Pro. He was the NFL receiving yards leader in 1991, part of the NFL All-Decade team of the 1990s. He's in the Cowboys Ring of Honor, and he is also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. One of the best to ever do it.
He was our first 88. You know, you and me. Yeah. He was our first 88. He was that dude. He, I remember the game that he got his concussion against the Eagles. They cheered him, and that sucked because I mean you never know when it's one of your favorite players' last games. You know, you never know unless like they say, hey, this is my last game, and it's like sort of like a farewell tour the way Kobe had and MJ had. You know, Irvin he got hurt, he retired, and he was done, and that sucked. But again, people like us, Irvin was that guy, wasn't he? I mean, he was my first 88. I don't know how. I mean, I know how big of a Dez fan, and I know how big of a Dez fan you were. I mean, obviously, we saw a lot of Irvin and Dez. The intensity, the playmaking ability, all of it. And I mean, obviously, my vote's Emmett. I think the people listening are going to agree with me. It's Emmett, but I have no issue with Michael Irvin being your guy.
No, right, and I know, Emmett obviously is the best player of the 1990s, but like I said, I just wanted to give a different perspective and give, a shout out to another player that I was very fond of and still am very fond of.
I guess we got to acknowledge both like Dion's 5 years stint there and Troy Aikman, his 12 years there.
Right,
even
definitely.
though like I think Emmett and Michael Irvin were better Cowboys for their time, but I guess we got to mention them at least, right?
No, sure, of course. I mean, obviously Troy, but Michael Irvin, I think when he was drafted to the Cowboys, it kick-started a new era. Even though it was still Tom Landry, it was the start of a new team, right? He was the first one there,
mm-hmm.
and then the other two came with Troy and Emmett. And once we had Jimmy Johnson bringing in all these free agents, boom, America's team was back.
Yeah, Jimmy and Mike brought that intensity to the Cowboys. And that really helped.
They brought that swag.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Do you want me to start with the 2000s? I think this is where it's going to get interesting. Do you want to start with the 2000s, or do you want me to go?
Go for it. No, you go ahead, man.
Okay, cool. So for the 2000s, it was kind of tough. Not really. It was like two players, basically. But I had to go with, honestly, this was probably my and a lot of people our age's favorite player growing up. I guess we were already a little older, so at least by the time I was watching, football around the 2000s, I like kind of understood it a lot more. When I was a kid, in the 90s, I would watch it, but I still wouldn't like understand all the rules and stuff. By the time the 2000s came around, right? By the time the 2000s came around, that's when I was arguing with the refs and the coaches, like, why did you call that play? So, but the player of the 2000s, in my opinion, is none other than the new era Mr. Cowboy, Jason Witten, who I think is obviously the greatest tight end the Cowboys have ever had, and arguably at least in the top 3 of tight ends all time of any team. 11-time Pro Bowl in 2 different decades, 2-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, Walter Payton Man of the Year, multiple college awards as well. He's currently still playing, now with the Las Vegas Raiders, unfortunately, but he's still playing, and I think is a guaranteed first ballot Hall of Famer. He also ranks second in all-time receptions and receiving yards by an NFL tight end, trailing only the great Tony Gonzalez. So I think obviously first ballot Hall of Famer once it's all said and done.
I love Jason Witten, and when I think of Jason Witten, I think of my grandma. So every time we would watch the game together, she would say, "Throw it to Witten," every time, because she loved him. She loved his intensity. I mean, whenever people think of Jason Witten, everyone thinks of, right? The Monday night play against Philadelphia. He gets his helmet knocked off, and he just keeps on running. He runs with that 4.75 speed down into the red zone.
They sold a lot of T-shirts with that play on there.
That's his career play, and a lot of all-time greats have like that one play. Like Tony Dorsett has the 99-yarder, right? Drew Pearson has, like you said, the Hail Mary, the first Hail Mary.
Right.
He had that play, but you're wrong. It's DeMarcus Ware. You like how I built that up?
I mean, okay.
No,
Okay.
it's DeMarcus.
Go ahead.
It's DeMarcus Ware. DeMarcus Ware, like, people might be sour about that because he didn't finish his career with the Cowboys, but the reality is that not only was he part of the All 2000 team, but he was actually an honorable mention for the All 2000, the All 2010 team. He's a 9-time Pro Bowler from 06 to 15. He was a 7-time All-Pro, or more first teamers. He led the league in sacks twice. He was the bright spot on a couple of crap defenses for the Cowboys. Let's be honest. Like, the Cowboys had a couple years where they had the best defense. It was him and Jay Ratliff and Terrence Newman when he was doing his thing, and when Sean Lee was first starting off. You know, there are players you can fill in there, but DeMarcus Ware was consistently going to be that guy on the Cowboys defense. You had to say, hey, watch out for him. He was J.J. Watt before J.J. Watt. Or before Khalil Mack or all these guys. He was that dude. The Cowboys had been waiting for, like, that premier pass rusher for years, because they had guys like Charles Haley or guys like Randy White, who played both defensive line and linebackers. You know, he was the premier, maybe the all-time premier Cowboys pass rusher. I mean, he has what, 139 career sacks. He's forced 35 fumbles. I mean, what can I say? And I was cheering for him when in Super Bowl 50 when they played.
Yeah, I think we all were.
I wanted him to get that championship. Yeah, it's like he's like your friend who you play high school football with, and he's the only one who gets a scholarship, and he goes on to a team and they win the championship. And you're like, I know him. That's my dude. Because it's like when he won, it felt like we all won a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he deserved that. He was, I mean, with all respect to Jason Witten. Jason Witten was not only the best tight end the Cowboys ever had, he was the best receiver overall they had from 2000 to 2009. They had guys like Miles Austin, Joey Galloway, Rocket Ismail. They had Terry Glenn. They had fill-in guy receivers. But Jason Witten was the guy, both at tight end and receiver essentially. But DeMarcus Ware played the second most important position on the field, edge rusher, and he was maybe the best in the league during his prime.
Yep. I mean, it's hard to argue that. I just think, Jason Witten is a bigger fan favorite, and I guess technically he also went to another team at the end of his career, but
he kind of overstayed his welcome.
Yeah, I can see that. 100% D-Ware, one of the greatest defensive players to ever play the game out of Troy University. So I think he was like their first ever draftee out of Troy. And then also I was watching
the first rounder. I don't know if he was the first draft pick, but he's probably the first rounder.
That sounds about right. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense what I said. Also, that draft where DeMarcus Ware was picked, that whole draft was amazing for the Cowboys. That was probably one of their best drafts of all time. A lot of good things to say about D-Ware. You can go ahead, the 2010s, and I'll keep my guy, and we'll see what you say.
I say the player who, ever since he's been drafted, has been on every All-Pro team, every Pro Bowl team for the last 6 seasons he's been there. That's Zach Martin. They've seen quarterbacks come and go, running backs come and go, receivers come and go, defensive stars come and go. He has been the consistent, always healthy, always ready, always the best on the field since he's been there. He was really, I think since it started, been the best guard in the league. He's been the most consistently great Cowboy they've been there. He saw the transition from the Romo, DeMarco Murray, Dez Bryant Cowboys into this Dak, Zeke, Amari Cooper Cowboys. And he's played alongside Tyron Smith his whole career. He saw Travis Frederick come and go. I mean, they're both really good friends, and obviously wish Travis Frederick the best. But he's been, at least in my opinion, not only the best offensive line, but their best player from the start. And, I mean, we all remember that draft night. I mean, there were rumors that Jerry Jones wanted to get Johnny Manziel. Remember that?
I do.
Everyone was like, oh, yeah, the internet was going to explode if Johnny Manziel was a Cowboy. But thank God, for Will McClay and Stephen Jones talking Jerry off the ledge and saying, hey, don't go for splash. Get this guy. And he's become not only the best guard in football, but one of the best players.
Love it. Love me some Zach Martin. I'm going to stay on the offensive line. And you kind of mentioned him, Tyron Smith, left tackle. Mm-hmm. Probably the best left tackle in the league for many, many, many years and still one of the best left tackles in the league. I know Shane threw a lot of shade at him earlier this year, but, we're just going to ignore that. But he's a seven-time Pro Bowler, two-time first-team All-Pro, two-time second-team All-Pro, and part of the 2010s All-Decade team. Again, just like Jason Witten, once he puts up his cleats, 100% first ballot Hall of Famer. It's going to be really hard to argue that. I could even see him being inducted into the Cowboys Ring of Honor as well, especially if we end up winning the Super Bowl with him. That would be great.
Yeah.
Love me some Tyron Smith. Ever since they drafted him, I think when the Cowboys drafted him, a lot of people thought it was a boring pick, kind of like the Zach Martin. Whenever you draft an offensive lineman in the first round, it's kind of boring. But ever since, he was on the team since 2011, he's been a force, and he's been a staple on the team. And it kind of changed the whole team dynamic going forward, right? He was the first piece of the wall of Dallas, and then we built on with Travis Frederick and Zach Martin and La'el Collins, and now we have this offensive line, and a lot of the other teams in the NFL ended up, mirroring what Dallas did and building the offensive line and seeing it as an essential unit in building your team. So I think Tyron Smith was the start of all that.
And I mean, you're right that a lot of teams mirror in Dallas because, like, a lot of people are saying, "Hey, we'll pick up our positions of need first and find offensive linemen later." The Cowboys are saying, "Hey, we'll pick first rounders and the offensive line. We're going to build this team like we did back then through the offensive line." They had three first rounders there. They found a guy who should have been the first round through no fault of his own, and La'el Collins. And yeah, Tyron Smith started all that, and I think you and I can agree. If he's not been the best left tackle in the NFL the last decade, the only one who really could measure up to him was Joe Thomas, and that's probably it.
Right, I agree. And unfortunately, he was not on a good team at all. But he was obviously their best player, and I think Joe
Jason
Thomas.
Peters.
Yeah, Jason Peters.
We hate the Eagles, but we have to acknowledge the greatness of Jason Peters. But I mean, Tyron Smith, he's still better, but he's in that same conversation.
Right, right. I think on the 2010 All-Decade team, it's Tyron Smith and Jason Peters who made it. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so actually there was a couple of them. So it's Jason Peters, Tyron Smith, Joe Staley, Joe Thomas. So those are the four tackles that they selected there. So
that makes sense.
We got 3 out of the 4, so we're pretty good there. Cool. That pretty much wraps it up for our favorite players each decade, celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Dallas Cowboys. What say you? Who are your favorite Dallas Cowboys per decade? Who's your favorite Cowboy of all time? Let us know in the comments on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, everywhere I place this, everywhere we are. Let us know. If you give us some comments, we might throw them on the show and might react to them as well. If you give us some, thank you again for listening to Den Boys Podcast. We very much appreciate all the recognition and feedback that we've gotten so far. We're doing great on Facebook. But thanks again for listening, and go Cowboys.
Special thanks to Julio Carrillo for intro and outro music. Find him on Facebook and YouTube under Julio Carrillo Music.
This episode of Den Boys Podcast is